to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 24, right? We've seen the calling of Abraham. We've seen him come out. We've seen him pass tests. We've seen him fail tests. We saw that ultimately he was faithful. We saw him lose his wife yesterday, and that Sarah died. And Abraham knows he's coming to the end of his life too. And there's one matter that hasn't been taken care of yet that he needs to make happen before he dies, and that is find Isaac a wife. Right, that is going to be crucial to God's promise coming true. God promised Abraham that he was going to make him a great nation and give him all these descendants, but right now he's only got Isaac, and Isaac needs to be married and be able to have kids if that promise is going to come true, right? So Genesis 24 almost plays like this romantic comedy in the middle of this huge existential epic drama, and it's very circle of life. So one generation dies out, but the next rises to take their place and have their own children. And so the question is, will the next generation live by trusting in God like Abraham did, or are they going to go back to their old ways? Right, so we pick up, and Abraham is getting old. He's already buried his wife. He knows that his son is going to be the one that God is going to carry on these promises through. But for that to happen, he's got to have a wife. He's got to have kids, right? And Abraham also knows that he's living in the land of the Canaanites, and the Canaanites do not fear his God, do not worship the Yahweh God. If Isaac were to marry one of them, it might make him forget God's promises. And that's going to be a major theme through the Bible, where Israelite men are instructed not to marry foreign women, not because they're foreign, but because they worship other gods and they lead their hearts astray from the one true God that they're supposed to be worshiping. So Abraham charges his servant to go back to his homeland and find a suitable wife for Isaac. And the servant says, "I'll do anything for you, Abraham, but wouldn't it be a good thing for me to bring Isaac along and that way the woman would know that this wasn't some scam, right? Like Isaac should come with him and he'd be able to pick, right?" Then Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me out of my father's house and from the land of my birth, who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, 'To your descendants I will give this land,' he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath. Only do not take my son back there." So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. So Abraham says, don't take Isaac back there at all, under any circumstances. And why? He reminds the servant of all the promises God has made to him and to Isaac by extension, that him and his descendants will inherit this land that they're living in. If Isaac goes back to that safety net of family and homeland, again, it might make him forget God's promises. It might tempt him to stay there and start his life there, neglecting everything that God has planned for him. And it's character development for Abraham. Remember back in chapter 12, that one of the first things we learn about Abraham, after God calls him and says, "I want to bless you, through you I want all the families of the earth to be blessed," Abraham runs away as soon as the going gets tough. As soon as there is a famine, he goes back to Egypt. Now, that's not to say that this is an easy task for the servant to accomplish. He's going to be going to a land that he doesn't really know, asking someone about Abraham's family to find a wife for a guy that they've never met. It's going to be an awkward and a tough situation, but Abraham says, "Don't worry, I have faith in God that he's going to go before you and he's going to prepare your way. They will know that what you're speaking is true, and that they'll come and follow you." And they make this oath by symbolically, the servant puts his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master. This is kind of like us raising our right hand or swearing on the Bible whenever we make an oath or a vow. And the practice is theorized by some to display the authority that Abraham has over his servant, and that's why the hand goes under the thigh. Other scholars say that it relates to an oath being made about descendants, because in the thigh, in that region, is where the reproductive organs are, and so it's swearing on his descendants and on his seed that the servant would do this for Abraham, which would make sense considering that the future of Abraham's descendants are going to be dependent on if this servant keeps his oath or not. So the servant gathers up all these camels and these treasures, both as a dowry and as a proof to Abraham's extended family that he's not scamming them. Notice where he goes. He goes to the well during the time of day when the women draw the water. This is a great place to find a woman, is it not? I mean, it reflects that if we want to build any relationship, whether it's romantic or evangelistic or discipleship-wise or any other kind of relationship, we have to be strategic in how we reach out to people. This servant wanted to find a woman. He went to the place women would be at the time women would be there, right? That's true for all relationship building, is to have a strategy for how to reach people and to be intentional, to think about how you are relating to other people. The servant said, "O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, 'Please let down your jar so that I may drink,' and the one who answers, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also,' may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master." So when faced with this seemingly impossible situation, impossible task, the servant prays, and he asks God to provide a sign and make himself unmistakably present in whatever he's supposed to do next. And so he asks God that the woman he should reach out to would offer voluntarily to water his camels, draw water for his camels. And look at what verse 15 says. I love it. Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah. So God answers this servant's prayer before he even finishes praying it. And it's a great reminder that God knows what we need, right? Jesus says that in the Sermon on the Mount. The Father knows what we need. He wants us to ask him for it, though, anyway, because he wants to have a relationship with us. So Rebekah, she's this young girl. She's actually Abraham's niece. And she comes up to the well and performs the sign exactly as the servant asked God that it would happen. First, she gives the servant water to drink, and then she voluntarily draws more water for his camels. And it says there's 10 camels. This is a lot of work. I didn't realize how much work this was until I started looking it up. One thirsty camel can drink somewhere around 30 gallons of water, right? And so verse 10 says that he brings 10 camels with him. Rebekah is drawing something like 300 gallons of water through the well here, right? This would have taken hours to complete. She's showing herself to be a servant to the servant, right? She's generous in giving up her time to bless someone else. You know, just like Rebekah went out of her way to bless this random guy she meets, we can do the same thing. We can be generous with our time and our energy to bless people and do nice things for them. And I love this detail in verse 21 too. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. You know, he's just sitting there watching Rebekah draw all this water for his camels and is being amazed that God is providing for him. So when Rebekah is finished with the camels, the servant gives her all this jewelry and makes his business known to her, right? And asks if he can come back to her house and have dinner with them. And they say, "Of course, you're family, so yeah, you can come and have dinner with us." And in verse 33, there's a great little line about how the servant is so eager to tell his business to the family that they're sitting all around the table. The dinner is ready, but the servant has to tell the story first and let everybody know why he's there before they can eat. He tells the whole story and says how God made it clear that Rebekah should be Isaac's wife, right? And he basically asks in verse 48, "Does Isaac have your blessing for Rebekah's hand in marriage?" Then Laban and Bethuel, that's Rebekah's brother and dad, replied, "The matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you whether bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you, take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." So Rebekah's father and brother say that since it's from God, they're not worthy to say whether it's bad or good. They have to leave that up to God. And what does that remind us of? They're deciding by God's wisdom, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're rejecting their own knowledge of good and evil and trusting in God's. It seems like it always comes back to that fact. Are we going to trust God's wisdom, or are we going to decide for ourselves? Anyway, they have this big party. The servant gives all these gifts to Rebekah and to her family. And Rebekah's mother and brother start to get a little bit of cold feet. And they say, "Can she stay for 10 more days?" And the servant, he's eager to please God and Abraham, and he wants to leave as soon as possible. So they leave it up to Rebekah. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, I will go. So Rebekah chooses to leave now and ask questions later. She's trusting God and trusting God's wisdom. And her family gives a blessing to her that strongly resembles God's blessings to Abraham. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. Specifically, that really sounds like chapter 22, verse 17, where God said that Abraham would inhabit the gates of his enemies, and that same thing is said to Rebekah. In the last little part of this story, we have a great little cinematic scene where Isaac is out in this field and he sees from afar the servant coming back with Rebekah, and Rebekah sees him from afar, and it's very cinematic and beautiful. Verse 63 says he's meditating in the field, and this is a word in Hebrew that has an uncertain definition. This is the only time it's ever used in the Bible, this word. So Strong's Concordance says it means to muse pensively. It also might be related to words prostrating or bowing down. And it's not the word for praying, but it's something very similar to it. I think that maybe Isaac is mourning, and he's mourning the death of his mother. He's also doing it in the land that's related to his mother's greatest sin, offering up Hagar to bear Ishmael. It says he's in Beer Lahai Roi, which is where God appeared to Hagar after she ran away from Sarah in chapter 16. And that's the place that Hagar named the well where God saw me. Right, so we see that Isaac is thinking all this over and grieving, but also seeing how his mother isn't perfect, right? And this is when his wife comes to him. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So Isaac and Rebekah get married, and they live in Sarah's old tent. Isaac finds comfort from his grief. Have you ever found yourself in a hard time and God sent you the person you needed just when you needed them? I mean, that is Rebekah for Isaac. And this should be all of us for our spouses and for our friends and for our family in the church. We should all be comforting each other in their times of grief. This story shows us God's provision for our emotional needs and his sovereignty over our relationships and encounters. The servant shows how we should strive to please God by pleasing our earthly employers and authorities. We all have people we have to answer to, and even though they might not always make the right decisions, when we seek to get along with them, we are able to please God through that. Rebekah shows faith in God by leaving her family, right? And that's exactly what Abraham did, going to a strange land, leaving all her family behind. Rebekah does that too, and it shows that she's put her faith in God. Abraham shows the importance of wise delegation and the impact of making good choices that impacts the future of families. Isaac shows us that God comforts us through relationships and through encounters that he divinely sets up for us. So there's really a little bit of everything in this story. God has now established the union of Isaac and Rebekah, and he is going to use them to bring about the nation of descendants that he promised Abraham. I'm sure their family will be perfect and drama-free, and nothing will ever go wrong in their family, right? Well, it's not going to. Tomorrow we are going to see the first little inklings of that. But until then, this has been 1189. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. God bless.